Well, good afternoon. Welcome to the life of a generalist, jack of all trades, master of none. Nothing like starting out the session with a little self-deprecating humor. A little bit about me. I've been in IT since '88. I started out as a computer lab director at Oklahoma Christian College in Oklahoma City, handing out 3.5-inch 720K floppies to the students as they came into our PS2 lab, and dual booted so they could load DOS on one disk and then their choice of DBase or WordPerfect or Lotus 123 on another disk. The advanced lab actually had a dot matrix printer in it where they could print on a 12-pin, I think it was, for the advanced lab back in '88. And then the really advanced lab had a machine, IBM PS2 Model 10. Had a 10 meg hard drive on it. And they were cooking with grease. Yeah. I've been tinkering with IT in one form or another since '88. I've worked in network administration, I've worked in internal audit, I've worked in security and compliance. I'm a husband and father of 4. You've probably seen my 4 munchkins running around here at the event. Give you a little background on my environment. I've been working at Columbia Academy for 6 years, and we have a 67-acre campus. We're in about 9 buildings on that campus. Most of the buildings are connected via fiber. Got approximately 1,000 students and about 130 employees. We've also got a satellite campus 15 miles to the north with around 120 users. We were the first in the state of Tennessee to implement an iPad 1-to-1 program. And we've got iPads that are 1-to-1 in grades 6 through 12. And in the lower school, the lower grades, we've got iPads at about a 2-to-1 ratio in carts and centers in all the classrooms. Up until a year ago, there was one of me, so the ratio of users to support techs, I would say, was 1,100 to 1. So that's a little overwhelming. So now you know where most of my hair went, that and the 4 children. We've got about 150 workstations, around 100 Mac laptops, and a partridge in a pear tree. Okay, good. You're still awake. That's our campus. That's our primary campus in Columbia. It's a very pretty campus. Tennessee is a beautiful place. Not as beautiful as Pennsylvania, though. It's gorgeous up here. Just a quick round robin here. Where are you guys from? What do you do? Are you specialists? Are you generalists? Do you work in education? Are you in private industry? Speak up. No hands necessary. This is how we shape the talk. You don't talk, we don't have something to talk about. Education? New York. My rental car's from New York. Are you in private sector? Are you in education? What? Private sector, okay. What is, at your organizations, just throw me out numbers, what's the kind of average ratio of users to techs? 2 to 1. How about, we'll give some buckets here, yeah. How about 30 to 1? I had that when I was at HCA. About 30 to 1. 100 to 1? 70 to 1. Not too bad. 1,000 to 1. Hey, you're in my ballpark. So I added an assistant, a level 1 guy, a year ago. He left, realized it was a little more work than he thought it was going to be, and decided that, he wanted to seek greener pastures. What are you guys looking for today? I know the title of the session is iOS Management for the Generalist. What are you looking for tips? Are you looking for how I'm doing what I'm doing? Are you looking for?
So what kind of MDM solution are you using
Okay.
first? Because I was going to ask you before I sat in here.
Absolutely.
But unfortunately you were busy with the stage.
Trying to figure out where the screens were? That's what happens when you mess through your settings. Something our users would never do. I personally use Meraki. I'm a Meraki enterprise customer, and I've been with them for about 4 years, I guess. I was with them for about 2 years as a free customer, and then about 2 years ago, I guess it was, they announced that if you wanted to stay free, that's fine, but you're kind of in a feature frozen state, and if you want to take advantage of all the new features that were being released in newer versions of iOS, as well as some of their features like time-based tags, location tags, you had to buy into the enterprise support. First piece of advice, how many folks are involved in purchasing, negotiating, vendor management? Everything is negotiable, everything. Mass 360, I think, is probably about one of the most expensive MDMs on the planet. but I've beaten them down and I got their price down around Meraki's price. My Meraki price, I did not pay 30 bucks a seat. I paid significantly less than that. If you paid 30 bucks for a seat, he's got a bridge he'll sell you.
How does it scale, Meraki?
Meraki scales very well. It scales very well. I've got it actually on all of my workstations, all of my laptops, and all of my iPads. We bought it primarily for the iPads for the one-to-one implementation for more management of the students. Remember, I'm a K-12, so all of my students are minors. We've got...
API, so you can push packages through it, or is it...
You can push packages. The workstation and laptop implementation is still missing some components. In fact, I was talking with the Meraki lady downstairs just yesterday about some of those features. I said, you know, Jamf and Casper Suite have had some of the features for desktop management and laptop OS 10X, Mac OS, whatever your flavor is, for quite a while. That's kind of where they entered the space. But Meraki is working on maturing that piece of it. They're really good with their iOS management, so that's why I've been happy so far. I'm starting to get to the point where I'd like to utilize a few more features for my laptops and workstations. And I'm going to give a little demo after a while about my Meraki implementation. Anyone else?
Minimal pane of glass management across all platforms.
I forgot, sorry. Minimal pane of glass management across all platforms, that's what he said. Yeah, and that's one of the things that I like about Meraki is that with the licenses that I've bought, it gives me a single pane of glass that I can go look at my laptops, I can go look at my workstations. And I've created different networks within my Meraki dashboard so that I can do that. Anyone else? I'll throw something at you. All right. What is a generalist? I said it a few minutes ago, jack of all trades. You kind of hate to add on the master of none. I kind of like to think that I'm okay at what I do. But I do everything, soup to nuts. And for me, in my environment, that's wireless, servers, workstations, laptops, iPads, copiers, something I always leave off, phones. We're internal VoIP. I use a Kudatel VoIP server, cabling, PDU, I mean everything. If it's technology, it's mine. I keep discovering almost every other day something new that's mine. So that's what a generalist is. So IT historically has been invisible, right? They don't see us until something goes wrong and then they scream for us, clean up on aisle 4. So it's a thankless job. It's just one of those things. It's like in the state of Tennessee, we used to have a law that said you do not have to have insurance unless you have an accident. And then you had to have liability for the other guy. I'm not sure how that was supposed to work because I know that they wouldn't necessarily let you go buy some Geico as you're trying to get the other guy's information from your wreck. Hang on just a second, I get my insurance. Anybody watch the IT crowd? Anybody not watch the IT crowd? Probably better question. Okay, a little learning experience for you.
Hello, IT.
Something's wrong with my computer.
Have you tried turning it off and on again?
No, I'll do that, thanks.
You're welcome, then. Hello, IT.
Tried turning it off and on again and nothing happened.
Is it definitely plugged in?
Sorry, that's it. Thanks very much.
You're welcome, then.
That's why I was able to hire a level 1 guy, because sitting in my help desk, the one thing that I needed in my environment was someone to sit in the help desk from 7:30 to 3:30 and just simply be there to help with those really simple things, changing passwords, rebooting, and so on. Wrong button. All right, so we all know that there's always more than one way to do a job. If you, that's one of the great things about Macs that I kind of tout to my users is that Apple makes it more personal for us. If you want to make a change to something, you can approach it from several different angles. So there's always more than one way to skin a cat. And along those lines, I want to give the caveat at the outset here that these are just what's working for me. These may not work for you. Your mileage may vary. Every environment is different. Everything has to be tweaked to your needs. So why do we manage these devices? Anyone? Why? Do we trust our users? I'm looking to see if I see one. No, I do not see a single head nodding up and down. What part of no don't you understand? It's just the simple fact of the matter that if we didn't have to have our users interfering with our jobs would be a lot easier, right? Then, of course, there's the flip side of that. If we didn't have our users, well, simple fact of the matter is, none of us would have jobs. So there's this fine line that we have to toe. Let's jump right into the basics. When you're going to get into iOS management, if you're in an educational environment, one of the things you're going to have to consider is whether or not you're going to be institutional owned or privately owned. BYOD, in other words. At Columbia Academy, we are institution owned. That was initially funded by a capital project, a capital fundraising project, and then the perpetuation of that is funded partially by tuition, and the other part of it, the lion's share of it, is funded by our technology fee that we tack on top of our tuition. We made the decision in-house that we were going to have a bunch of teenage, in this case where we made the decision, boys running around campus with iPads. Did we want them to have cameras running around campus on a campus that has a whole lot of stairs and a whole lot of girls? You can just simply do the math yourselves. If you're in a college situation, may not be a thought for you, but the things that you've got to consider, you've got to be pragmatic about those decisions. You've got to take a look at why we're making these decisions, because we don't want them to be overly invasive on our end users. They still need to do their jobs, but we need to be able to do our jobs. Purchasing. If you're going to purchase, we're going to talk in a couple minutes about VPP and DEP. Most of you have probably been in one session or another over the past couple of days where you've talked about VPP and DEP. Has anyone not talked about VPP or listened about VPP or DEP in the last couple of days? So everyone's got at least a rudimentary idea of what those two are? Okay. If you go OEM and you want to participate in the DEP, the device enrollment program from Apple, you've got to purchase directly from Apple, or you don't get to participate. That's just the way it works. If you're going on the aftermarket, you're going to buy those anywhere. We've been in the DEP market for the last, when they introduced that? 2 years ago? I think it was 2 springs ago. This spring, when I purchased just a month ago, I purchased another 150 devices. We decided that we're not sure that we're staying Apple iOS forever. We might go to Chromebooks. A lot of those in K-12 have gone that way. So we're going to buy a few Chromebooks this fall, do a little test drive and see. But that being the case, we didn't want to go spend $500, $600 per device. So we decided that instead of buying Apple Air 2s or Apple iPad Pro 9.6, whatever that model's called, at $600, $700 per device, I could buy the Apple iPad Air at about, I think I paid $250-ish per device. So buy those at a really nice cut. Once you've made that decision, that's your first step. You got to buy them, bring them in, and you start configuring. So that's where you start letting the games begin. If you're going to use an MDM, here's where you need to make that decision. It's going to have to be tied to your DEP account. How many folks in here use an MDM of some sort? Vast majority. There's a couple that don't. How many of you all use DEP with that MDM? About half of those. Essentially, in my case, you asked about mine, I use Meraki. Behind the scenes, I've set up a trust between Meraki and Apple. Apple and Meraki talk on the back end. If I go into the area of my Meraki MDM dashboard and I say, hey, let me take a look at my DEP devices, there's actually a hesitation there where they do a little talking in the back channel, 5, sometimes 10 seconds, and then it pulls me up a list of my DEP enrolled devices. So before you do that, you need to decide if you're going with an MDM, what MDM you're going to go with. Do your negotiation, your vendor management piece. Day usage, this is kind of one that I don't know that a lot of people have thought about, but if you're going to go with data usage, if you're going to allow the folks to buy their own, or if you're buying them institutionally and you're attaching them to an AT&T or a Verizon or whoever cell plan, almost everyone except for Sprint, I think now has data caps. T-Mobile doesn't anymore either. But I've noticed that Sprint's not real popular here around Penn State because I'm having a hard time getting a decent signal. You want to help enable those users to know when they're approaching the data cap because it's real easy to really quickly churn through that data. I mean, how many of you all have done that on your own personal phones? And either you hit that throttling point or you hit that cap where they say, you're done. Hope you can find some Wi-Fi. iCloud, another piece. If we are going to manage these, depending on how tightly we're going to manage them, we need to decide if we are going to allow iCloud or not iCloud. Because what you have to understand is that iCloud is a public cloud that is completely outside of our sphere of influence. So that's just something to dwell on, pieces of information that you need to be thinking about as you go through these. As I said, volume purchase program, It's Apple's program for purchasing apps in bulk. If you buy more than 20 apps, a lot of times, Apple, I know, gives you a 50% discount. A lot of vendors do, some don't. An important point to think about again as you start this process is, are you going to go managed distribution or you can go individual ownership? Because if you go managed distribution, and what that means is that if I give you an app, I can actually take that app back if you leave the school or if you leave my employment, whatever. So I retain ownership of that redemption code. But the other side of that is the original way of doing things, and this is actually my recommended way. I think that folks should just simply expense that as a cost of doing business. Most of the apps that you're going to purchase, maybe Pages, Keynote, a couple others, $5, $10 if you're buying in bulk. That's fairly insignificant in the OpEx budget of most folks. So that's, again, that's my personal recommendation. Your mileage may vary. You may be a huge fan of the managed distribution, and that may work very well for you. And in fact, if you're on a large global basis, if you've got 1,000, 10,000, 15,000 devices, that may save you significant money each year in your operational expenses. DEP, Device Enrollment Program. We talked about this a moment ago. It allows the institution to own the device, but something we have to remember is that it's still tied to an Apple ID. So while you've got the management side of it tied to your institution, and how many folks have dealt with Apple support in trying to get a device unlocked or released from somebody's Apple ID? Has anyone had luck? How so? Just once. I'm going to toss it to you because you raised your hand too. You're closer. You had a death. So they passed. So Apple actually worked with you on that? Did you have to verify, provide an obituary, or would you?
We just had to prove it that we paid for.
Proof. Okay. That's great. That actually is great. It's not on. Test. Test. Hello. Hello. Oh, I didn't touch any switches. Okay. So, again, your mileage may vary. You had luck with somebody who died-ish. As far as somebody leaving your employ, though, has anyone had luck with somebody who left their employ?
We do it about every 2 weeks.
You're kidding me.
We have Apple purchase devices that we don't put in DEP because they go out to patients and get reloaded using Configurator 1 still. And they can put in there.
So you've supervised them using Configurator 1. Now, how do you get them? You get them unlocked through Configurator because Configurator owned it.
Right. We'll contact Apple.
Uh huh.
And say, hey, this patient's known, we bought it through Apple.
Hello? Hello? Is it on?
Can you hear me now? That guy went to T-Mobile, by the way. You'll be seeing him shortly in some T-Mobile commercials.
I wanted to talk. I can't throw. Can you throw?
Back corner.
Can you repeat your question?
His answer.
There's a lot of copies.
He's telling us how he got it. He gets about every 2 weeks. He said they have one at the hospital. A patient leaves and they haven't unlocked it from their own ID.
Yeah, pretty much every 2 weeks. Some patient gets discharged. You deal with it quite a bit. But we contact Apple, provide them with the serial number, and that's pretty much it.
So they're getting better.
Oh yeah, much better.
You're getting a lot better. That's.
Yeah.
I think everyone's probably heard some of the horror stories of the mother or the girl whose father died and left a lot of data on there that was relevant to the estate, and Apple said, sorry, no can do. So some of that bad PR may be blowing back on them finally. Apple ID for students. How many of y'all use this? No, none. Okay. This may be a K-12 thing. It was a stroke of genius, sort of. It allows you to create bulk accounts. I mean, I don't know what the capacity is, but I've done 1,000 before, so from 2 to 20,000 probably. In bulk, via CSV. Many of y'all have created Google Apps accounts or other accounts in bulk by doing the same thing. Essentially upload a pre-formatted CSV and allow it to pre-populate all those fields. Well, that's great. One of the things that I do at CA is I take a school-owned account like AppleID at school.edu, and I create an alias. It's an auto alias with Google Apps. Have you all used the Google Plus aliasing? Essentially, you add the plus after the actual account name. So AppleID at school.edu is an actual email address at my institution. Well, something like that. And if I wanted to create an account for Mary Smith, I'd add plus Mary Smith. And then if I wanted to create a John Smith account, I'd create a plus John Smith. So any email destined for AppleID plus Mary Smith at school.edu actually comes to me rather than going to them. Now the AppleID is actually created as, because of that CSV, mary.smith at school.edu. Well, it's a great idea in concept, but there's more than one step. There's two additional steps that kind of render this concept a little on the stupid side. After creating 80 accounts Friday before I came, I got 80 of these. And each one of them required me, it's behind Obi-Wan's head, to copy a key, click a link that took me to an Apple website, to which I had to fill in the 3 security questions, had to fill in a phone number, accept a couple of agreements from Apple, essentially 8 or so more steps, then click submit and it was done. Great, I'm done, right? No, you gotta verify now. I got 80 more of these. And I had to click the link, verify now. Where's my button? Right there. Click the verify now link, which of course, because I used, let's see, you can't read it, but I used a plus account up there. So it knew that it was mary.smith at school.edu. Took me to the site and it showed me, hey, welcome, we need to verify the account, AppleID plus mary.smith at edu. So I had to copy and paste the mary.smith at school.edu, type in the password that I'd pre-created, it was already in there for the account, hit submit, I was now done. So they had this wonderful brainchild of an idea, but having to spend 2 and 3 more hours verifying and validating the account renders it virtually useless. Doing the parent stuff that we're a public school, we're not a public school, we're a private school. So we're able to step into that role as part of our agreement with the students. Essentially, what Apple's concept with that Apple ID for Students program was that they were going to say, hey, you guys can pre-create these accounts. LA Unified School District, where they were going to send out, was it 100,000 iPads to the students? The one that fell flat on its face a year ago. That's how they were going to do. They were going to create Apple IDs for all their students, and then the parents would go do the 2 other steps that I had to do. And so, of course, that alleviates it from you. But how many of y'all deal with parents? And a couple of you? Do they always listen? Do your users always listen? No, they don't always listen. So we tried to take that out of their hands and make it simplified, but failed. One of the things that we've noticed, Apple School Manager is coming out at some point in the future. It's in beta still, and if you already have a VPP or a DEP account, can you get in? No, you can't get in on the beta program, even though you're one of the people that's been using it, and you're probably one that's going to have the biggest benefit from being part of the program. I don't understand why Apple continues to ignore the average school year, whether that's starting on July 31st or September 1st, but the next release is going to be October 12th or something, after we've already gotten into the school year. So I like Apple. Apple's a great company. It's gotten large and bloated, and sometimes they don't think things all the way through, like some of us do ourselves. Configurator, excellent tool, as you guys pointed out. It allows you to install configuration profiles before rolling them out to the users. Configuration profiles are something that a lot of people have been talking about at the conference this year, just like with VPP, EDP. Most of y'all have heard about those, yes? Hold up your hand if you have. Okay, good. Allows you to tweak things, allows you to supervise them, Apple Configurator, for a number of the features that you want to restrict or may not want to restrict. For your users, for your students, for whatever it is you've got, you must have them under supervision. In order to do that, if you have not purchased your devices through Apple's DEP program, then you must pre-configure them, pre-supervise them with Configurator. Things like the camera, iMessage, etc. Those are all what was it, iOS 7, I think? iOS 7 supervision requirements. What can you configure with Configurator? There are it's hard to read, so very, very many things. The restrictions that you can enable, anything from allowing screenshots, allowing backup of enterprise books, allowing the use of the camera and or FaceTime, allow iCloud photo sharing. Talked about iCloud and its public facing capability, whether or not you need to restrict that. You might have HIPAA or SOX requirements that may not allow you to put that stuff in a public cloud, or maybe it does. It's probably something you want to have a discussion with your compliance officer about. Again, so very many things. Yeah, this is the next page of the same restrictions. Global HTTP proxy, again, as I mentioned, Columbia Academy is a K-12 school, so all of our students, well, except for some of those about to graduate are minors. Global HTTP proxy, we have placed a Lightspeed bottle rocket in line at our firewall, and it allows us to implement a level of supervision on those, a level of content filtering for those devices that the parents were hugely appreciative of. Through this setting, we were able to filter not just on campus. I've always been able to filter on campus and provide content filtering for those of you who have dealt with firewall management, that you can control the means of egress, then you can control what they can get to. But I had no control when they went to Johnny's house, or when they went to McDonald's, or they went to Nicaragua, or wherever they went. The global HTTP proxy locks in, through a supervised setting, locks in the ability to control where they get their DNS from. So they get all of the DNS from my bottle rocket. So if they're at Johnny's house, or McDonald's, or Nicaragua, or France, or wherever, it phones home and says, hey, can I get here? And I've taken a one-size-fits-all approach, because this is only for my one-to-one iPads. So all of my students from, I've got an 11-year-old in the program. From 11 to 18, they all get the same level of content filtering. And it allows me to turn things on and off for them on the fly. Very handy. Something you should be very, very careful of if you've if you've gotten into Apple's iOS restrictions, that just flew out my brain, and messed with the content filter. Anyone messed with this one? This thing's really sensitive. It's really nice, especially if you've got minors. You can you can essentially turn on a whitelist through one of the settings here, and then blacklist or whitelist, or just allow it to do its thing. Built-in limit adult content is what I've got enabled there. It's a very, very restrictive set of what it considers adult content. I mean, not just the bad stuff, but writing sites or anything that could remotely possibly be abused by somebody online is listed as adult content. All of the social media sites, of course, all of the gambling and pornography and all those other sites. But it's handy, especially, I use this one on my lower school students. So it takes the settings that I've got, it takes the bottle rocket restrictions, it takes my Sonic Wall content filtering solution, filtering as well as this. So it's like triple gloving for my little ones, my 3rd through 5th graders. Passcode, you can make all kinds of changes to your passcode values. Tweak it to your heart's content. If you've got a security department, probably a good idea to get with them and see what they'd like, what they recommend, or maybe they don't care. Wi-Fi, you can pre-populate Wi-Fi settings. If you've got a network that you want to pre-populate with everybody, maybe you've got an onboarding network or something like that. At CA, we use in the IT office, we've got an onboarding access point that's wide open, but we've trimmed its power way down. It really can't be hit outside of the IT office and the counselor's office next door. Maybe a little bit in the math classroom on the other side, but we put them on that for onboarding, do all the stuff we need to do to them. We use Aerohive's wireless in-house, and one of the things that I love about Aerohive is their PPSK. Has anyone heard of PPSK? Private pre-shared key. Not a pre-shared key, but a private pre-shared key. Each device on my network has its own specific key, so it gives us the ability at any given time, If we see an IP address within AeroHive, we can automatically know who's using that IP address and where they're going. It's nice. It's a little bit heavy on the lifting on the front side, but on the back side, it makes the forensics piece a whole lot easier. So what is supervision? I think we've covered that pretty much. Certain restrictions require supervision. Like I said, the camera, FaceTime, the global HTTP proxy that we talked about. All of these things require supervision. So you've got to have Configurator in place if you're not purchasing from Apple's DEP, through Apple's DEP. This is a list of the iOS restrictions that you can make changes to if a device is supervised. Anything from allow iMessage to allow the App Store. And even, nice thing is, I pulled this out of my Meraki MDM. It lists which iOS version that feature was introduced with. So yeah, like I said earlier, I think it was supervision started in iOS 7. But allow the News app, allow Apple Music, Apple Radio. Maybe you want to restrict multimedia on your network, and we do, just because of the sheer number of users. We have a dual redundant fiber 100 meg pipe coming into our campus, but when you drop 1,100, 1,300 devices on a network, that can really quickly cripple a network unless you've got some additional bandwidth controls in place, which we do. We use, through our AirHive Wireless, we use user profiles and limit guest access to 2 meg per user, limit student access to 5 meg per user, and the adults are limited to 10 meg. And I've got caps on the aggregate for those groups as well. So no one group of users can throttle out can choke the network. With Configurator, one of the things that you're going to want to be very aware of is the database locations. If you're like me, you image yourself from time to time. Maybe you're tinkering with the beta versions of OS X. So you need to be aware of where these libraries are. Previously, Apple said, go to there and pull out com.apple.configurator. That UI wasn't even there. With Configurator 2, they added these additional directories. You want to be sure to back up all these. Apple also recommends backing up library keychains and VARDB lockdown. I'm going to make all these slides available on the session here as soon as we end. As I said, I use Meraki. I've used Jamf in the past. I was one of their initial iOS MDM when it was required that you have an Apple server. Now I guess it'll run on pretty much anything, won't it? Anyone Jamf in here? You can run Linux, you can run Windows. Yeah. All right. The Meraki, I'm not married to it. I'm vendor agnostic in anything I do. I try to look for the right tool for the job. There's, of course, in private schools, we have a little more budgetary considerations than public schools do. So we've got to take into consideration the budgetary piece of it. But one of the things that we wanted to do when we started hearing about DEP and VPP about 4 years ago was we wanted to be able to leverage that. Big fan of working smart, not hard. Don't reinvent the wheel. Some tips. These are just random tips. Does everyone know in here the cold reboot? That's what we call it. Maybe you don't call it something else where you press and hold both buttons until you see the Apple logo. We call that a cold reboot. That's one of the biggest things that my level 1 guy does at the help desk, and the swipe up to end. That solves probably 90 to 95% of my student iPad problems. Caching server. Has anyone talked about caching server? I mean, besides the speakers, has anyone else talked about caching server? Have you listened to it? Who else got one? Yeah. Okay. Caching server, you've got to get one. I mean, this is a huge bandwidth saver. For us, my caching server is probably up to a couple hundred gig, and it's continuing to grow daily. Our books are there. Our iOS updates are there, all of our iOS apps. And I love it. It just works. It's kind of a set it and forget it thing from Apple. Something really cool that I just discovered last week. You can now restrict apps via MDM. Has anyone else known about that for longer than I have? Because I just stumbled on it. Meraki tends to release features without telling you about them. It's like tinkering around with settings. Oh, that one wasn't there last week. and I got into it, and I was able to restrict apps. So that's one of the things that people, teachers and parents and administrators have been asking me for since day one, since we started this journey at CA 6 years ago, was, hey, we can restrict the level of apps. We've restricted it to 12 plus. But what about some of those apps that are inside of that ratings umbrella that we don't want them to have? 10-year-olds with Snapchat. Good idea? Etc. Snapchat, I think, is rated 6 plus, or last time I looked it was. Ratings change from time to time. So you can go in there and actually blacklist apps now. That was awesome. The MDM, if you're going to have more than just a few iOS devices, you've got to have one. Unless you're extremely cache flush and you've got staff out the wazoo and you can touch every device, you've got to have something to help you. It's all about the tools. Configurator, required to supervise them. DHCP leases. Do your users move around? Not sitting there or standing there, but do they move around between buildings, between rooms, between VLANs? Something to consider, and this may or may not be inside your purview. If you're a generalist, it probably is. It's probably all yours. It's inside mine. The DHCP lease expiration period. Take a look at yours and see. If they're going to be moving between VLANs, you don't want those DHCP leases tied up 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours after they've left the area. I mean, your scope is only so big. Maybe you've got a 16-bit scope. I've got a 22-bit scope at each building for me. So as they move between buildings, I've set mine to 30 minutes, expire, free up that lease, free up that IP.
How are you handling that? Like that's not the talk. When you finish, we can talk about it. So,
Okay. Okay, don't forget it. Excuse me. All right, Meraki. You were asking about Meraki. Let's see what we're set to here. Are we mirroring? Yes, we are. Oh, it's a little bitty. So as I mentioned a moment ago, I discovered the capability to restrict apps. It was just right there. Like I said, about a week ago it appeared. So I've gone in, and we don't allow texting at CA. Maybe there's something you don't allow in your corporate network, but it's a written policy, but not a logical policy or an electronic policy. There's so many apps out there, and then it's a catch-22. Blacklist everything? Well, this ability I just got. Right. So you can allow all, you can only allow the following apps. You're correct. And that may be something that I've got to take a look at with my administrators. We've got to make that decision as an administrative team. And here's where in education, mix and match terms for those in education, you understand that I'm talking about the principals and the president of the school. I report to the president of the school. But yeah, I agree. I was used to speaking admin is me. I'm an admin, but that also now includes the secretaries, right? Administrators. So that kind of blew my mind when I went to my first RenWeb conference where we were talking about administrator stuff and they're talking about secretarial tasks. I'm going, I don't care about this. So yeah, so it's something we'll have to reach as an administrative committee decision. But I love that. What would you like to see in my MDM? What can I show you? What can we talk about? Who's got the button? Who's got the button? Do we still have the box? The box is in the back corner. Who has a question? Who'd like to see something? We've got about 30 minutes left, so we can talk about this, a couple other things. You had a question about DHCP?
No, it's okay. We can talk about it. That has nothing to do with it.
Okay, I have a question slide up here.
Are you ready for shared iPad?
Catch. He asked if I was ready for shared iPads. My short answer is maybe. I defer to what I said earlier about Apple School Manager. I'm kind of in the same boat. I went to as a lot of you probably did, went to the Apple introduction of these new features and this new cool stuff. Great. There's a lot of wow factor to it. I hope that it works for me, especially like in our carts and centers in the lower school. It'd be a real boon to us to be able to do that. Now, granted, one caveat that Apple even put out there that makes sense to us is that they say this really isn't a good idea if you've got 16 gig devices, which is what we've had for years in the lower school. Right now I've got iPad mini 2, 16 gigs. So that would mean that They've got another year in their life cycle, so we'd have to wait a year to be able to implement that or really cut down on what they can and can't save locally. It was an answer?
Yeah.
Who else?
So I've got the free Meraki. I have like 1,000, a little over 1,000 iPads in it.
It's a lot.
But it's feature limited.
Right.
One of the real big deals, if we pay for it, would be assigning apps to the devices. Do you do that?
I do.
Is it
I do it through
silent?
tags.
Silent? Like
I don't do silent, and that was one of the features that Apple rolled out with iOS 9, I believe, was the ability to supposedly do that. And they supposedly fixed it a little bit with 9.3, and 10 should make it Cibola, the city of gold. That'd be great to be able to push some of those things. In our case, we use like Schoology, Intel Study, and a few other school-specific apps. The Google Slides, Sheets, Docs suite. We're a Google Apps school, so it'd be nice. They don't require, they don't have to pay for them, so it'd be nice to just be able to slide those in there. And I did notice that the last batch that we updated, after they checked in with Meraki, quickly. Now, one of the caveats there is on your settings under iTunes and App Store, you got to take a look at your password settings. Make sure that your password is set to not require for free apps and to remember your password for 15 minutes. So if you push out 6, 8, 10, and I think I'm around 10 for that group, free apps, it'll ask you for the password for the first one, but then whereas in previous iterations you kept getting hit for the password for each of the next 9, it'll actually remember it now. Now that's still kind of a janky setting. Has anyone experienced where you turn on remember password and you sit there and look at it and it turns itself back off? You turn it on and it turns it back off? Have you seen that one?
Yeah, I have.
I have no explanation for that other than ghost in the machine. But I've done it up to like 15 or 16 times before it finally took. On, off, 16 times. Okay, it took. It eventually took. Did it do for you?
Yeah, and it's also like the settings for, download books and music and apps.
Yeah,
those
auto
you flip
download
those, and then they go
app
boop, and
updates.
they go right back off. So I can't explain that.
No one else has seen that? I'm serious. It's really freaky, creepy, crazy, and mind-numbingly frustrating, right?
Yeah.
Especially if you're sitting. I'm just trying to scroll through 10 iPads at once. I turned you off. Turn on. Turn on. Back and forth.
So you said you're K through 12. What's the lowest grade level you go with iPads?
Technically, our preschool has some. Our preschool has 10. We've got about 30 or 40 students in the preschool. We've got some iPad Mini 2s that have some really robust 2 to 4-year-old cases on them, or cases that are capable of handling a 2 to 4-year-old, drops and things like that. But by and large, they're regularly used from 5 years old up through 12th grade.
So then the follow-up is do each of those preschoolers or kindergartners have an Apple ID?
They do not. Those, what we do, and this is a little different. What we have done is create an ID per grade level. For instance, in my case, it would be junior K _ center 1, because we've got 4 junior K classes. So it's center 1 through center 4. Now, they all have the same batch of apps that I maintain in a Google Sheet. And so when we initially set these up, I went to the App Store, logged in with that, or created that account, went to the App Store, logged in with that account and said, download these, and then locked everything out. They're not allowed to delete, they're not allowed to add. If they want to add something, we can do that. I can just log into the account and add it. And then one of my tech team, one of the things that I've implemented, because being 1100 to 1, as I mentioned earlier, is extremely daunting. It got to the point when I first started that I couldn't walk down the hallway of the elementary school without being pulled in 20. I was on my way to change a toner cartridge, and I'd get pulled by 5, 10, 15 different people for various tasks. Hey, can you look at or I'm having a problem with, you guys all know the story. And so I implemented what I call a tech team. Everyone's got their users that are a little bit more tech savvy. They know to reboot. They know to check to see if it's plugged into the wall. They know some of those basic things. And you can actually say, hey, Mary, would you go help Johnny install a printer? That's those people I tried to tap and say, hey, would you be part of my tech team? It's an unpaid position, but it kind of goes towards goodwill as an organization. So I can have one of those tech team folks go to Mrs. Crump's junior kindergarten class and say, hey, would you go pull down 2 new apps for her? unlock those iPads, download them, and lock them back.
Okay, so then I was going to ask on top of that,
Mhm.
when you give that teacher that card of 10 or whatever, and you push the apps out through Meraki,
No,
you do it
the
through
only
configure-
apps I push out through Meraki in those grades are paid apps, which I try to very strongly discourage them from getting paid apps just because now I've got to deal with, how many of y'all in here have children or work in an educational environment? You know that the teachers at the beginning of the school year, they put their, their wish list on the board, and it's little balloons, or it's a handprint, and you take that and you go buy her, 4 bags of Ziploc baggies, or you go buy her these markers or whatever. Some of them would put up their iTunes gift cards, and which, that's totally understandable.
Right.
But at the same time, what they don't understand is being 1 to 1100, the administrative side of that, the IT administrative side of that.
Yeah, this is the final part, because I'm the same thing, and we used to have that account, and we just said log into your app store and download it, and it goes on the other 9. But now we're at the 1-to-1,
Right.
and I'm above that 10 devices per account.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to find a solution that I don't need an Apple ID for a kindergartner, but if there's 20 kids in that class.
That's why I do it for the grade level or for the cart.
Okay.
Yeah, like I also have carts that wheel around. They're designated for specific sets of grades, and they'll have 20 to 25 devices on them. And that cart 1 has a cart 1 at cabulldogs.org iTunes account for it.
Does Meraki support the device assignment portion of VPP?
The managed distribution,
Yeah.
they do support it, but, and this is a really big caveat, if you're going to go to managed distribution, it's an all or none.
Right.
So, for instance, for my upper school students, I've purchased, previously, before you had a new device, you would have to purchase pages.
Right.
When nowadays, if you got a new Apple ID and a new device, or just a new device, they'll give you pages. Well, there's always those that fall out, so I needed to buy some. So I went and bought, 50 codes, and I pulled those codes through VPP, got a 50% discount, pulled them into Meraki, and said, here, I create a tag called apps pages. And when I would get a user who didn't have it free, they went to their app store and said, please pay me $10. I'd say, okay, here's a tag. You'll get a pop-up in a little bit. They'd get the pop-up and redeem the tag. Any remaining unredeemed codes that you get automatically go over to the managed distribution. So you are now all or none. So that's something to think about.
Have you considered a second VPP account? Because most MDMs will allow you to put a second VPP in there
I haven't,
just for managed
but
distribution.
I like the way you think.
That's actually what we're doing. We're switching over to managed distribution.
So you can go managed distribution with this group of apps
Yep.
and standard distribution with those.
And that way we're not creating Apple IDs anymore. Everything's just, a straight device to the user.
Nice. Did everyone catch that?
It's a wonderful thing.
Outside the box thinking. I like it a lot.
It works really well.
Yeah. Who else? No? Okay.
Is there
Yeah.
any way to search in Meraki where you can see if
Oh.
an app
Hang on. Box. The magic box.
Is there any way in Meraki where you can search, for example, which device has just the simplest thing, snapshot installed on them before you did this blacklisting?
Let's go look. Let's see. Let's just go look. We recently deleted a bunch, so we're down to, I can't hardly read that,
You can just
645.
Search for any.
Yeah, you
of
should be
them.
able to search for, I'll search for a Keynote.
Well, does it like give you a report, like without you having to go through that one? When you
They
can
do
set up like
have a report. It's a single report that I've wanted for those students who started installing texting apps, which some were rated 17 plus, some weren't. So if they're below the 12 plus rating, they could still download it, like Text Now, Text Plus, some of those, which is why you saw them on my blacklist. Deer Hunter. There was a time that we lost our management in the middle of the last school year because the trust relationship between Meraki and the devices died, and it was a debacle. But that content filtering layer kind of came off, and they discovered that they could go buy. I mean, not that we care about Deer Hunter. It was just I knew that Deer Hunter was a 17 plus rated game, Deer Hunter 2014. So there were a bunch of them that went and got that. So I was able to create just a simple report query that says, Okay, anything that says TXT or TEXT or Deer Hunter, let me know about that. So it was it'd send me a report. Hey, Deer Hunter's installed on Johnny's iPad.
Okay.
And there weren't individuals. I had to do it all as one.
Oh, can you run script too to go back and delete the app off of that?
Therein lies, in my world, lies one of the catches. I haven't gotten real good at scripting. I was in my previous life as a network administrator, but now that I'm back to being jack of all trades, I haven't had time to sit down. I'm very sure that you could do that. Next. Anyone? There we go. Good long arms.
Thanks. To answer your question, with the new update on most MDM solutions, you can go into that menu that you showed before and make a new restriction that's separate.
That one?
And just add the app right in there, and it'll scope to whatever devices you want to scope it to. And now you don't need to get a notification. It'll automatically rip that out of there anytime they try to put it in.
Now, I did discover with the age level restrictions, apps that are rated 17 plus, 12 plus, if they had, the restrictions came off and they were able to go download, say, Deer Hunter, when the restriction came back on, the app stays there.
Yeah,
it just
gets
hides
locked.
it.
It gets locked as though it's...
It does lock it, right.
It's not usable, but you also can't remove it if you try to remove it because of the way
And
it
they'll go to their app store. Okay, you got an update available? No, I don't.
Yeah.
That says Deer Hunter. Well, I can't
But
touch it.
That's one way to solve his issue there.
Exactly.
Just answer his question.
Okay. Excellent. Excellent. Still got 22 minutes left. All the way in the back. How good's your arm? Your arm's awesome. That was great.
Ooh. Still working?
Oh, yeah. Just remember, like at Walmart, you break it, you buy it.
I wanted to ask you how you handle repairs of iPads.
How do I handle repairs? Previously, up until I got my assistant, the guy that I hired, up until a year ago, I had been outsourcing them. Being jack of all trades, I had zero time to deal with repairs. So I would outsource. We had a place, I work in Columbia. I live in Spring Hill, which is about 15 miles to the north. We had a place sort of on the way to my house called the Pod Drop. It's a national franchise out of Michigan, I think. Has anyone heard of them? Lots of places are doing them now. I outsourced a lot of that to them. However, the Pod Drop, as I discovered later, was doing a lot of shoddy repairs. Extra glue, extra tape on the inside to hold things together, missing screws, bent bezels. Yeah, you love it. So the guy that I hired a year ago was formerly a handyman, and so he was comfortable with taking on that aspect, and so he started doing screens, LCDs. He did a couple of batteries and even did a couple of backs. Backs were major surgery, of course. And as he started tearing into them, he was the one that discovered, what is this garbage that these people are doing? Who did that? This has been repaired before, obviously, missing 2 screws that are holding the frame together. So that, when he left, I was left this summer with having to go back to the Pod Drop and say, hey, I got a few repairs here. But the new guy that I've already hired, he starts next week. That was one of the requirements was, hey, how comfortable are you with minute repairs and minutia, steady hands? And I gave him a couple little simple tests, but he was comfortable with it, so planning on moving that forward. I've also got our high school band director, works for me part-time, and his name's Mark. One of his hobbies, some of y'all have some really weird hobbies, you know that? One of his hobbies is reading printer manuals. Like I said, some of y'all have some really weird hobbies. He likes reading printer manuals, and he's into the minutia. He likes to know how things work. I mean, we all do, or we wouldn't be in the field we're in, but he really, really likes to know, and he got into doing some of the repairs as well. And last summer, before I hired the guy that worked for me last year, he did some of those repairs for me as well. So he's also helping this summer with a few of those.
And what would you say your breakage rate is?
My what?
Breakage rate.
Oh, that's an excellent question.
You have 1,000 iPads? No, how many?
We have almost 800 iPads. Okay. And we cycle, every year we cycle, they're slated for a 3-year life cycle. So somebody comes into the 7th grade, they get a new iPad. They hold it for 3 years, and they get another new iPad. In 10th grade, we take that one back and sell it on the aftermarket. Until this past year, when we handed out all the iPad Airs. Very little. I think iPad 4 was the highest device that the students had, at least. My biggest breakage was with some of the adults who we didn't require to have their iPads in ballistic cases. The students are required to have theirs in the ballistic case that we provide, or provide a like case that's been approved by the technology department. This past school year, we went with the iPad Airs, and we went with the Gumdrop Drop Tech case. Have you all seen those? It looks kind of like it's got a tire print on the back. It's got a screen protector on it, and then there is a frame around the outside edge of the iPad that kind of wraps over and onto the camera as well. But this whole area in the back is exposed. Then you get the silicone shell that goes over it, like many of them do. But right here in the back, the vast majority of the back is all exposed with the exception of that rubber. What we discovered is that students in their earnest haste to get places often toss their backpacks, throw things in their backpacks, are not as careful as you or I might be or might hope they would be. And they would stick their stuff in their backpack, and then they'd lob their backpack across the hall to, because I wanted it to be over there in that corner, and I don't have time to walk over there. I've got to get over here. They've done it right in front of me, and I'm just stand there staring at them like, did you just throw my $600 electronic device over there? And lo and behold, what do you think happens? Breaks, bends, cracks, smashes, and I've had them come in with I swear it looks like a footprint in the middle of the iPad. And so this year we've had a higher instance of breakage than any other year. Those backs on the iPad Airs are part of that aircraft aluminum that they brought out with the, was it iPhone 6? Was that Bendgate? Yeah, iPhone 6. It was that same generation of metals and the alloy that they used. So there was it's a lot more flexible, a lot more pliable. I've seen them come in with the corner that's just a month ago. One of the iPads came in with the corner of the iPad bent over, kind of like a dog's ear sometimes, right? Except the ironic thing was the glass hadn't broken yet. This stuff is tough. I mean, it actually takes some impact to break them. Mark, like I mentioned, my band director, he was walking around with one of the replacement glasses that had a problem. One of the ribbon cables was broken, so he's just kind of dinking around, banging things with it. He can't get it to break. He's like, and of course I'm looking, what are you doing? What are you trying to break? Yeah, I'm trying to break it. I want to see what it takes. And he finally got to the corner of a desk, and he had to smack the corner of the desk with the screen to make it break. I mean, Gorilla Glass is designed to be tough, right? It does its job. So these guys really have to work to break them. But
so would
this
you say,
year, to answer that, to discuss, to build on the drop tech cases from Gumdrop, we're not putting those back. Any cases that had to be replaced this year, including the cases for the new devices that we bought, are going with the Griffin Survivor case.
would you say 5%, 10%? What's your breakage rate?
I would say a solid.
I'm asking for budgetary reasons.
5%. Previously, it was less than 2%. This past year, I'd say a solid 5%. Probably 10% of a couple of the grades. Kids go through growth stages. There's a couple times in their lives they get stupid. Let's see if you can figure out when those are.
And then do you make the parents pay for the damage?
We do. We have what we call a responsible use policy. And in that responsible use policy, essentially we're having the kids, yes, I know they're a minor and they can't legally enter into a binding contract, but their parents can. Kids are just signing to acknowledge they've read it right. In that RUP, we lay out some of the terms. Hey, you're going to be good with the electronics. You're not going to do dumb things like leave it in your car. You're not going to run over it. If you do something to break it, let's see. Initially, 6 years ago, we said it was a copay of $50 for the first incident. This last year, we said up to $100, up to the first $100 you're responsible for, and we'll pay for anything over that. Second incident, you have to pay up to $150. Third and subsequent incidents will be on a as decided basis. Had one student come in and swore that his iPad had fallen off the counter in his kitchen onto the tile floor, and he was talking to one of the folks in the office, and I'm standing there looking at it, trying very hard not to get glass shards all over myself. And I look at it and I told him, I said, what it looks like to me is that you took this iPad about like that, and got angry at something, someone, and got so angry that you hit it and then hit it again in almost the same place. I said, now before you say yes or no, that's what I did, let me remind you of a fact that, see that picture over there, that's my wife and 4 children. I have 4 children. You can ask any one of them how much I appreciate it when any one of them lies to me. Please bear that in mind before you answer me. So did this fall off the counter in your kitchen? No, it happened like you said. I said, okay, you owe me a new iPad. That was negligence. That was just bad user behavior. PEBCAC, problem exists between keyboard and chair. We can't fix stupid. Anger management. It's caused issues more than once. 13 minutes. What else we got? Sky's the limit. iOS, MDM, one-on-one programs, Meraki. Let's see. So small.
You said you had
What
an
did
issue with Find My iPhone, and with that being enabled, and trying to get that removed from people having added their own Apple IDs.
Because that is where you lock it
Right.
through
Why
Apple.
would you not use Configurator or use your MDM solution to either like Jamp escrow is like a key that you can use to prove that you own the device, or
Oh, that's
why wouldn't
nice.
you just disable iCloud in general?
See, that's one of the reasons that I'm vendor agnostic. When I hear something like that, it makes me go, maybe I need to go visit the Jamf guys.
I had to go through that. I forgot to enable it.
It was painful, right?
Well, I ended up going to the Apple Store, showed them proof
This
that I owned the
is
device,
ours, yeah.
and they were like, all right, cool, here you go. Sat in there for 30 minutes while they got a manager. But in that instance, I mean, you either could disable Find My iPhone, or you could.
Oh, the box. Sorry, I forgot. We both forgot.
I'll hold the box.
Woo. It just makes interaction fun, doesn't it?
It does. We actually just bought a few of these. It's really interesting.
Cool.
So why would you not just disable Find My iPhone or iCloud for that functionality?
Going forward, because that, I said that earlier, the reset was our number 1 fix, 95%. Number 2 is they're teenagers. I don't know where I put my iPad. Or somebody took my iPad out of my backpack, and they do. They travel between buildings. It's like this student never leaves this particular building, but somehow his iPad managed to get down there.
But that falls under the responsible use
It
agreement,
does.
right? So
Yes.
yeah, there's a lot of what ifs, but then we've also taken the approach of with VPP assigning applications to users and letting them use their own Apple IDs, and then we can then revoke it when we're ready to revoke it.
We take a little more of the opposite approach to that, more of a controlling
Sure.
approach to it. In fact, just it was yesterday, the day before, I was texting with my boss saying, hey, you know, with the adults, we've let them, here's an iPad, we've already got it under management, but you need to put it under your Apple ID, whether that's Mary Sue at charter.net or whatever that is. I said, you know, one of the things that might help me that I ran into this summer with 2 of my employees who had left, one of them had left, and he had it tied to his institutional Apple ID, but his wife had gotten into his account, and she had set his recovery email address to her personal Gmail address, which if I had been able to get in there and get access to her personal Gmail address, I could have taken care of everything myself, but I couldn't. So I was asking my boss, I said, hey, do you think we might ought to take a little bit more, since we do take a little more controlling approach. As I mentioned, it's a private faith-based school, so we take a little more involved aspect of these things. These kids that are our students, a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them are the kids that my kids go stay the night with. They're the kids that I may teach in Sunday school and things like that. So we're able to interact with them. I mean, and we do have our policies about things like Facebook. You know, you shouldn't befriend a student. If a student befriends you, it's okay to accept, maybe use prudence, all that good stuff. So we do take kind of the flip side approach to that. I guess that's my answer.
Gotcha.
This guy right here? Great. To answer your question about the Find My iPhone, Find My iPad, Apple doesn't provide an API to disable that through MDM. They may have used
In other
to.
words, once it's enabled, you can't disable it.
Right, you can't restrict it in the MDM at all.
so they can't set that. All you
I
can
still,
is
do you guys
run
use
backwards.
the second toggle that they introduced, what, 9.0? The, when my battery's about to die, phone home and say where I was? I have not, I turned that on for all of our devices now, but I haven't benefited from seeing, oh, here it was. Now with Meraki, I have. It last phoned home at this date and time in that location. Talk to your users. People are afraid of what they don't understand. They're skeptical. And when you're talking to those users, keep it simple. Speak English, not geek. One of the things my boss, I guess he takes great pride in the fact that he hired an IT director that could speak English when he's introducing his administrators to people. He's like, oh, and here's Eric Karkau, our IT director, and he can speak human. Thanks, I think. And while we're speaking of speaking English, not geek, while we're on the subject, we are geeks, not nerds. Nerds count beans, geeks count bytes. So you're all geeks. Remember that. Anything else? Like I said, I'm wide open. We've got 8 minutes left. We're still on the yellow-orange screen. Yeah, okay, well, I'll stick around for the remainder of the time. If anyone has any questions, happy to help. Enjoy the rest of your session. Dinner probably in another 40 minutes. All right, thank you.